just to touch upon the breadth and depth of some of the things you've done, which I think is relevant context for some of the questions I might offer you later. So, co-founder of Infosys, one of India's largest and most respected IT companies, we could say. Architect of Aadhaar, the world's largest biometric ID system, and now used over 1.4 billion people for identity verification, banking and government. Those are impressive. Driver of UPI, indeed. Unified Payments Interface, which revolutionized digital payments in India. UPI now handles over 130 billion transactions annually and accounts for over 80% of retail payments. The chair of the Indian stack. A set of open AIs enabling digital public infrastructure, DPI, for identity payments and for data sharing. And all amongst that, you're a philanthropist. You're a thought leader known for promoting inclusive tech, digital equity, sustainability, and recently featured in Time's Top 100 Voices in AI. That's an impressive resume. In preparation of our sort of little fireside chat, I've been watching a few clips of you on the internet, which are inspiring, thought-provoking. And in many of these interviews, you talk about pretty much wearing two hats. You have got your hands into, let's say, the public infrastructure, and we touched upon some of these things in the resume, but you're also, of course, on the private sector, being the founder and non-executive chair of Infosys. So sitting on that crossroad between private and public, and then correlate that with some of this new inflection point around technology, if you think about AI, I'm sure we need to talk about AI today. What's your observation around where the impact is going to be the biggest? What do you see?
Well, actually, as you rightly said, the fact that I have a leg in both camps actually gives me a unique perspective, because when I work on public sector infrastructure, it's truly at population scale. How do you get a billion people into anything? And those learnings are invaluable. And then when I work in the private sector, which has a different way of working, it's about applying that to business and market problems. So I think I'm actually very bullish on the potential for technology for transformation, be it for businesses like Shell, be it for societies. But it's important to do it in a way that it is good for people, that it's inclusive. So when I do public systems, we make sure everybody is in. That's part of the game. If you create exclusionary systems, then you have social issues. So inclusion has always been a big part. But now I personally feel that with scalable AI, with the energy transition, and Shell is a leader in that, I think there are many, many opportunities for technology. And the way I look at this is, I look for unlocks. Is there some unlock which opens up the whole thing? And all the work I've done has been to finally hone in on something which, if I turn the key, it just explodes. So we have to think about the same in your business.
Definitely same in terms of the opportunities. It's also a matter in terms of that realization is that this is not a game about automating the present. It's actually stepping back and trying to re-image how we do things.
Yes.
And through that, actually unlock one potential. I think that's where we see the commonalities. The scale in Shell might be a little bit different than the scale.
No. Shell is the world's largest energy company, the largest LNG producer in the world, the largest chain of retail outlets. It's big.
Yeah. It's always great to get some recognition from people who've done it at a scale that is dwarfing our company, so we take that any moment of the day. Thinking a little bit about what you said about being in, and that's new technologies will actually change the way we do things. You could actually say that the good old business process re-engineering is sort of back, and with AI you really need to rethink some of these processes. But the implication of that is also that many of the work processes for individuals will change. So the technology might actually work, but what about the change management? How do you actually get these people to buy into some of the change management?
No. In fact, in all my work, I find people and change management is actually more difficult than technology. I think you can figure out technology. It may be very complicated, very projecting a vision of where we will be and then galvanizing and motivating people to get there and to deal with the challenges that you face on the way there. So I think that is a much bigger challenge. And also I think the globalization of energy, I think it is already a globalized industry, but I think even more so today. As for example, in your business, the fact that energy will flow from any part of the world to any part of the world, whether it's in pipelines or LNG ships, that it's going to go to a whole new level. So the global market and supply chain it creates. So on top of that, we need to bring in the technology to make it work even at that global scale. So I think but it's all about change management at the end of the day. How do you get people on board? How do you convince them about something? How do you deal with the insecurities? That's where the action is.
So if you look back on Aadhaar or UPI and painting that sort of vision for the future, what's your main lesson around these kind of things?
The main lesson is to look at the trend. The trend is your friend. So, for example, I'll give a few examples. We designed Aadhaar in 2009, and we decided it would be a digital ID system, which worked online on the cloud. Now in 2009, it was just 2 years after AWS had been launched, so it was a long time back. But the fundamental notion that creating an online ID system which works on the cloud and anticipating that it was just the beginning of the 3G installation, that mobile internet would become cheap and therefore allow you to do it securely, was an insight which we got way before it happened. And then we designed for that point. So thinking about where it's headed and then saying, okay, let's not anticipate today, but let's anticipate where it will be tomorrow. And then plan for that. That's an important thing. And that's true in your business too.
That's a great insight. The trend is your friend. I'm gonna steal that catchphrase going forward. That's a good one. So diving a little bit into today's world of AI, agentic AI, and as many of us will see as a new inflection point coming up. And it's a bit of a conversation sometimes, particularly in corporates like Shell, where you say, is this a conversation around innovation and driving new technologies and getting the upside of the technology? Or do we need to continue to focus on, let's say, mitigating the risks and the ethical side of some of this? Do you think,
on the what?
On the ethical side, for instance, and the controls and the cyber components that actually come with AI. So do you think that those two things can coexist?
No, I think the AI thing comes with its own challenges, whether it's a whole new class of cyber problems that will come, or whether it is hallucinations, whether it's bias in software. And we run the risk that we end up with another hodgepodge of technology. So how do you architect this for the future? How do you design an architecture which allows you to bring in new AI capabilities, new models, new agents, new whatever, and make them plug into your whole architecture, I think is very important. So architecting for AI, it's not about specific products, because the products will come and go, and there's a massive investment happening in this. So many companies are spending billions building technology, and the leads will keep changing. But how do we make sure that we don't lock into that, and how do we glide on top of the changing technology? That's an important, I think, architectural principle we have to follow.
That's music to the ears. I think I heard you say architecture probably 7 or 8 times. I know there are many people in the audience that feel that the importance of architecture is sort of revitalized in the need to navigate that future. This is not about bringing individual technologies back in. As per your point, they will come and go. What is the architectural direction?
And this is where I think, Robert, that's where the tension is, because companies want quick results, and they'll put pressure on all of you saying, I want to see something by tomorrow morning. But if you want to build for the future, you have to build thoughtfully on these things, which takes some time to do. So how do you balance the short-term pressure for results with the longer-term need to put in a way of future-proofing it? I think this is where some of the tension is.
I can tell you, we all feel the pressure a little bit. I might need your help at some point to convince everybody, because there's many people, surrounding our senior business leaders and telling them in terms of what the art of the possible actually is. And here we are trying to make sure that we balance that sort of opportunity statement, which is probably inspiring and real to some extent, is grounded in today's reality. And that's, to your point, we architecture ourselves to a new future. I really like that prospect. Going back perhaps to your own experiences and in the context of Changemakers of Tomorrow, which, as I said, is also a celebration of our partnerships and the great ecosystem that we've built over many years and the thought leadership that we build around these kind of things. We can't do it ourselves. We need partners like Infosys to continue to be on that journey. So from your own experience, what have you learned is important in that journey? Yeah? If you think about Shell, in the past we've sometimes given away the keys to the kingdom. To our partners, where we have regained, and actually we would say Bangalore and building up Bangalore is a insourcing strategy for Shell to make sure that we regain our true technical strength. But we also need our partners. So what is your experience in
Well, I think it's a balance between the two. I think obviously strategic assets, strategic IP, we should be in complete command over. That's what drives the firm. So that's absolutely correct. But at the same time, being networked into a whole ecosystem of partners who are different knowledge, innovation, and strengths, the combination of that along with your core strength, actually, then it's much more of your leverage is higher. Like when we built the Aadhaar system, I built it, I had a core set of people, and we owned the technology, we owned the architecture, we owned everything. And then we figured out how we can leverage a larger ecosystem around us. But we made sure that, for example, the data flow was entirely with us, how the data moved, how quality was maintained, whatever. Because we had to do about 1.5 million enrollments per day. So we would have 35,000 enrollment stations around the country where people enroll at about 50 people each. And all the enrollments had to be of the highest quality and had to be then transported completely securely back to our data center for deduplication. It was a huge logistical supply chain of data exercise. So that we built the combination of where we kept the technology to us, we didn't want to lose that, but we got other people to build specific things. So it's finding the balance between, but you have to own the core jewels, absolutely.
Yeah, again, I think I see a few themes going. So we talked about architecture, and now we talked about data and the importance to control that data. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the aspect of data, which I'm sure in today's world is so important. Often when I talk to senior leaders, I explain to them that the D for digital is not about digital, it's actually about data. So in your experience, and of course we sometimes theoretically understand why data is important, but if you work with businesses or perhaps even with governments, for them to do the real hard work and actually clean the data and get data structured to the extent that the technology can work is not always easy. So what will be your lesson out of the trajectory that you see to make sure that people who run the processes actually start to take ownership of their data to the extent that the technology can be built on? What will be the key nuggets?
We had the advantage that we built greenfield systems. So we leapfrog. There's nothing there anyway, so why not just leapfrog, right? So we built it in a way that we thought through the data process architecture, how the data is organized, how it's stored, how it's accessible for AI. So you can think of that from day one. Now, what happens though with global companies is that there is estate which has accumulated over 30, 40 years. And therefore, and often that data, I'm not saying Shell, I'm saying generally.
I'm sure it's definitely true for Shell, so don't worry about it.
And data is all over the place, it's in silos, the security issues, and AI is all about data. I mean, it's not really about the model so much as the data for the models. So I think never before has it been more important to organize the data and not necessarily bring everything into one place, but a way to get it from wherever it is, but consumable by all your AI stuff. So I think that's more important, and that's again a thing which is below the hood. It's not visible to top management. What is all this data stuff? So you have to tell them, guys, all this data is out there, and unless we get our act together, you won't get all the magic that we have been promised.